Meno, very quickly we find out that although it is an inquiry into virtue, it is more. It is, to a certain degree, an inquiry into the nature of inquiry. And we find this right away. Meno asks Socrates how virtue is acquired. Do you become virtuous by teaching, by practice, some other way? Does it come to you by nature? And right away, Socrates has not an objection to any notion of what virtue is, except that he thinks it's the wrong question. It's not the wrong question if you're looking into just virtue, it's a wrong question if you're looking into anything. But you can't determine whether something is teachable or not, or any particular characteristic it may or may not have until you know what it is. And so the first objection is how can I tell you whether virtue is teachable or not, or how you get virtue until I know what virtue is? So right away is a logical question. He's saying the question, what is virtue, has priority logically over the question of whether it's teachable, because we'll never be able to say for sure whether it's teachable until we're sure that we know what it is. And this sort of sets the thing off when Socrates freely admits that he doesn't know what virtue is. This is actually really key, right? And so what he convinces Meno is that they have to look into the nature of virtue itself before they can look into whether or not it's teachable. So he asks Meno, do you know, can you tell me then what virtue is? And again, the answer that Meno gives is not objectionable because of anything particular that he says. It's the kind of answer, again, logically, we might say, Socrates is saying that the way that Meno answers is wrong. Why? Because he gives examples. He says here, the virtue of a man is to administer the state. The virtue of a woman is to order her house, etc. And there's all sorts of different virtues for different kinds of people. And Meno says, no, or Socrates says to Meno, no, what I want is the general answer to what is virtue. Right? And he gives the example of bees. Is there's maybe all individual bees are different from each other, but they share a common element, a commonality, a common nature that makes them bees. So if you use that as an analogy, then what is being looked for is not a collection of examples of individual virtues, but rather virtue itself, the common thing to all different virtues, what they share or must share if they're all members of the class of virtues. And so that's the difficulty, right? Can you say that? And it's not so easy, right? For instance, Meno at certain points says justice is a virtue, or justice is virtue, right? And Socrates says, well, do you mean that justice is virtue or a virtue? And then he says, well, if we were looking into the nature of figure, and somebody said, well, a figure is triangle, that wouldn't quite work. Triangle is a figure or a shape. So what is being looked for? For Socrates, what is the truth of the matter? It's whatever it is that draws all the different things that we call virtue together, because it would be the common element that they all share. Can you define that? Can we find that out? That would be very good to know. And Socrates, is dragging Meno into this thing. Right? Gives them an example, what he defines figure and things like that. So Meno begins to get the hang of it, right? That what they're looking for is virtue itself, and the kind of answer to the question, what is virtue, would be the essence of virtue, the general definition of virtue, not an informal list of examples. And he gives the one. He says, well, then, Socrates, virtue is when he who desires the honorable is able to provide it for himself. Socrates does have problems with the content of that because he says everybody desires what's good and honorable, so that couldn't make you virtuous. So yeah, I mean, it's just basically uh, trying to show Meno the kind of inquiry, not special to virtue or arete, the kind of inquiry that Socrates wants them to engage in, kind of answer that if they could find an answer that what it would look like, this general definition of virtue that would be cover everything that we would call virtue. And then we come to the end here where Meno basically says, you know, you're like an electric eel, the torpedo fish. Right? You've stunned me. I used to think I knew what virtue was, and now I don't think I know what it is. You know, and you're like a wizard. You know, you put people under your spell. And Socrates saying, "Well, yeah, man. If if I've stunned you, it's because I'm stunned. Right? If I've made you think that you don't know what virtue is, it's because I know that I don't know what it is. So let's look for it." And there ends the first part of it.